This is Robert Kraft, and I'm your host for the Planet MicroCap Showcase Virtual Investor Conference 2020. And I'm really pleased to bring you our next panel here. This is a topic and an industry that I think all of us are really, really rooting for right now. Especially now that we're in the coronavirus pandemic and everyone that's affected. So with that, this panel, our biotech panel, is titled Potential Solutions for Addressing the Coronavirus Pandemic. Our moderator is John Vandermoos. He's the Senior Biotech Analyst at Zacks Small Cap Research. And I will give way to John. John, thank you for doing this, and thank you to all our panelists.
Thank you, Robert, and welcome everyone to our panel today, where we're going to discuss some potential solutions for addressing the coronavirus and share some of the projects that our CEO panelists are working on. So far, we've seen about 2 million cases of coronavirus and over 125,000 deaths so far. And something like this would have seemed unbelievable even just 2 or 3 months ago. In the past, we've seen things such as SARS, MERS, and the swine flu, but we never thought it would get out of control in the US. And when we saw that, government grants supported a lot of early stage research, preclinical and early stage clinical research, but none of these projects really were able to get to an approval stage. But now with the coronavirus, it's really been a wake-up call, and for public health and for life sciences companies as well. And now is the time to take advantage of what we've learned in the past and really apply it to the crisis in front of us. We've seen a fatality rate of over 6% and trillions of dollars of financial destruction, and the impact is severe. So with this as the background, we're going to hold our panel today, and we have an impressive group of CEOs who are going to share what they know and tell us about the companies they represent, and also the efforts that they're making against COVID-19 in treatments and in vaccines. We'll also look at how they're focused on coronavirus. Our panelists, and let me introduce them one by one. We have David Dodd. He is the CEO of GeoVax. We have Mark Emalfarb. He is the CEO of Dyadic International. We also have the CEO of Heat Biologics, Jeff Wolf. Hello, Jeff. And then last but certainly not least, we have Seth Lederman, CEO of Pharmaceuticals. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for being here today with us. Let me start out with a broad question for the group. What do you think is the biggest hurdle we face right now in overcoming the pandemic? And David and I actually had a chance to discuss this a little earlier. And let me kick it off to you, David, and tell us what you think about that.
I think the biggest hurdle to overcome and to address the pandemic is to fully understand it. I mean, I think we still are dealing with evolving epidemiologic data, some of which we seem to be able to believe and some of which we seem to continue to question and all. And I think beyond that, the most important effort and initiative should be to contain the outbreak and all, and that gets into treatments and how we handle individuals with that. I think that's the greatest challenge that we have right now, is to fully understand sort of the evolving nature of the virus, and then also be able to contain it through whatever methods, not just medical treatments, but containment and all the efforts that are underway.
Who else thinks wants to identify a hurdle they see out there? Mark? You probably have something to add.
I think he's right. I mean, the point is, social distancing was a good thing. Shutting off access, shutting down certain parts of the country. Probably should have shut the whole country down, but a little too late for that. But I think the point here is that through science and technology, there's a silver lining here that, all the technology and the money being spent to advance biotech and pharmaceutical research and development, we'll be ready for the next pandemic. We'll solve the one today, be ready for the next one tomorrow. And then, of course, all that technology help us make better, quicker, faster, cheaper drugs, just normal everyday prescription drugs. So I think just like the computer industry learned off of the space shuttle mission or space mission to the moon, just think of how the biotech world is going to change and how it's going to evolve and how much faster and quicker we're going to now adopt things where in the past we refused as an industry basically to adopt new technologies and stayed with the tried and true. And that's why we're in the problem we're at today. So I think it'll help us for tomorrow, and it'll help us address today, be ready for tomorrow, and lower the cost of healthcare for global health.
Very good. So the hurdles, that's the point we're trying to address here. What hurdle do you think, the greatest hurdle that we face right now with the coronavirus?
Well, I agree with the other panelists, but in this particular case, we actually don't know the right technology to use in a vaccine. So there's really a scientific leap that we need to make. It's not the case that there's some off-the-shelf vaccine, for example, that was tested and worked in SARS, that we can quickly adapt to this. In fact, we have to, as other panelists mentioned, we have to understand this virus, the immune response to this virus, the protective immune response to this virus, and what kind of vaccine technology has promise.
Okay, very good. And then finally, I'll move on to Jeff to hear his thoughts on the same question.
Great. You know, I think we're facing so many different challenges today due to this epidemic. I think a major challenge we face is maintaining perspective on things. So the pandemic is obviously it's wrecking HOVAC, but the steps that we're taking to treat this pandemic and to self-isolate are also wrecking HOVAC as well. The question I think we face is, you know, at what point does the hammer become more worse than the pandemic itself? And so I think we really need to understand it, understand the secondary effects and the kind of the collateral damage that's being caused by treating this, because there is substantial damage that I don't think we understand at this point.
Okay. So moving on to another topic. There are reported 70 coronavirus vaccines in development, and there are probably about a similar number of treatments that are either in preclinical or in clinical trials right now. So with so many choices, how should governments and private investors work to find the best candidates? What should we look for in a good candidate? And I'll let whoever feels most strongly about that start off.
Well, I can chime in. I think honestly, a drug that's unaffordable is 100% ineffective, because if patients can't have access to these vaccines or drugs, it doesn't really matter. And so I think what's happening here is people have to look at, there's basically a recipe that's the genetic sequence that encodes for whether it's an antibody or a vaccine. And then there's a living cell that's going to be used to produce that. And if you can't make those things affordably, nobody's going to have access. So you have to pick the right sequence, and based on knowledge and experience, there's a lot of experts that have been working for decades on MERS and SARS and coronavirus. And there's a whole bunch of new people that just showed up and are taking advantage of the opportunity. And both play a good role, because science is sometimes serendipitous, and you never know who may find the magic bullet. In our case, we're going to take whoever finds the magic bullet and help them mass produce it in the vaccines, which we hope are going to be potentially in 8 billion doses in a month, because we can really produce a lot of things very quickly. So we're agnostic to who finds the magic bullet. We just want to make sure that the scientists are really working hard on coming up with a recipe for the right gene sequence that's going to be effective and affordable when you produce it.
I would say that we really don't know what is a good candidate. I think right now we're at the stage, as others have already commented on, that we need multiple various candidates, especially from vaccines, because one thing is for certain, we are not going to prevent COVID-19 because it's already here. So the focus we can do today is to contain it, reduce its impact, and deal with it, and enable people to continue, move on with their lives. The challenge will be, how do we prevent it should it reoccur at another time? How should we then be prepared in the future for addressing such types of threats that may arise, obviously unexpectedly and all? And I think that's what we're going to learn out of all of this. And I think in the end, we're going to have multiple, from a vaccine standpoint, multiple vaccines that are out there, some with certain attributes for maybe going much more quickly at an outbreak, but others perhaps may have greater durability and may come forward with that, with different types of platforms. I think it's going to end up with a variety of vaccines that we need to have, just as we're probably going to have a variety of treatments that we'll have, and we already have a variety of different tests that we need to have. So I think that's what we're going to have. And if anything, this is going to be a wake-up call for individual nations as well as the world at large, that we need to have much better preparation for these types of threats, because we haven't been prepared. We dropped everything with SARS in 2003. companies lost millions of money, if not hundreds of millions of money, who were trying to develop and proceed, and suddenly everything was pulled out from under them and all. If we're going to allow that to happen, then people are not going to be prepared, not going to make the investment. So we have to develop some type of, I'll call it stockpile investment, to be prepared better in the future.
Sounds like you're suggesting that we be as broad as possible. And any other thoughts on how we could be more focused in terms of, you know, picking the winners and the losers for the government and investors?
Yeah, you know, so I was reading today that in Italy, new data came out that in Bloomberg they reported on it. 99% of the fatalities in Italy had comorbidities, and you know what the average age was for the fatalities in Italy? Hey, take a guess.
Maybe 80.
79 and a half.
Okay.
80 years old was the average age. So you need, I agree with Mark that you have to have a vaccine that can address the world on a low-cost basis. But I think also you need a vaccine that is designed to help those people who are dying. And we can identify great majority who those patients are. But we don't know the we don't know the mechanism of we don't understand this disease too well. So to the extent that you can apply both an antibody response and a T cell response, we don't know which is better yet, and we don't know how the two interact. So I agree with that there also needs to be multiple vaccines out there that that could be applied either together or a vaccine designed to apply to be used on the patients that are actually dying of this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Seth, any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think the comments for the other panelists were excellent, but I'll just say that it may not be one vaccine for everyone. There may be one vaccine for healthy, immunocompetent, call them young and middle-aged adults, and then there may be another vaccine that would be for example, older people, and another vaccine for immuno-incompetent people. For the idea of herd immunity is an important concept, and that would mostly apply to the healthy, immunocompetent, maybe non-pregnant population. But clearly, the population at greatest risk is the people over 70, people with concurrent illnesses, and those people are also a challenging group in order of inducing at least T cell immunity. So it may not be one size fits all.
Okay.
Hey, John, I can add a little color. So if you think about Sanofi has a product they purchased, Protein Sciences, for a product called Flu Block for the elderly, which theoretically is supposed to stimulate the better immune response than a normal seasonal flu shot would give. And so it's aiming at the elderly with compromised immune systems. And so if you can stimulate the immune system through an adjuvant or a technology, which is one of the things we're working on, the C1 technology, we ran a test against Flu Block, or the baculovirus produced HA, and we demonstrated with Sanofi's data that we can actually make a more potent vaccine, at least through mice trials, and make it affordable. So I think he's right. Not everybody has the same immune system, but if you can help the immune response in the elderly, I don't think it'll hurt the younger people to have a better immune response and enhance that. But if we can't target the elderly population, which in the West is growing, and protect them, then we fail as human beings. And I think he's 100% correct. There will be more than one vaccine and more than one way to skin the cat, but we have to skin that cat very quickly.
Certainly. So right now we have about 2 or 3 vaccines in the clinic right now. I think they're all DNA related or RNA related vaccines. But most of the traditional vaccines won't be available to be in the clinic until late summer at the earliest. So, and then after that, it might take another 12 to 18 months to finally get something approved and get it out there. And I think a lot of the lay people hear that and they think, gosh, why should it take so long? Does it even make sense to pursue a vaccine? David, you already mentioned what you think about this. And then maybe you can start off with a response there. But, because it takes so long, it looks like perhaps it could be even the summer of 2021 before there's something that's available, assuming that it works. Why should we invest all this effort in that for something that may not even do anything?
Well, it will do something. The question would be, when will it be available? And I think what we have to consider is that increasingly there appears to be a viewpoint that COVID-19 is going to be a recurrent threat. And if it isn't, but it is something that's similar to it, we need to have vaccines that we are further along than we certainly were at the time of this outbreak and all. And so we need to be prepared, because at some point in time, we need to be able to prevent it. And that's what the vaccines do. We need the treatments to be able to treat people who become infected with it. But we need to have vaccines to be able to prevent it. It's the only way to break a chain of infection from particular pathogens and all. So we absolutely need them. I think certainly in America, we're so used to getting something on demand, fast food, fast everything and all, that if someone says it's 18 months or if they say it's 5 years, we think that is a lifetime. But keep in mind, typical vaccines take 10 to 15 years to make. The Ebola one that was approved this past December was developed in 5 years, fastest of any vaccine ever done and all. So that is really an outlier and all. So I think what we need to do, we need to keep the public calm, keep them updated, keep the general public. Those of us who are in the industry realize that we need to figure out how to work in parallel mode rather than sequential on certain steps, move much faster, think outside the box, perhaps collaborate more than ever before and all, but to go with speed, but not with haste. I always say the difference between speed and haste is patients' lives become at risk. So we need to make sure we do all the right activities, but do them in a manner as quickly as possible and perhaps differently than we've done before.
Very good. And any other thoughts on this topic? And also, what are some of the bottlenecks? David mentioned a few, some of the bottlenecks that can be streamlined, and then also, what are some of the examples of things that can be done in parallel? Seth, you're working on a vaccine. What do you see from your perspective?
I think what is important to go on in parallel is further understanding the disease. For example, we really don't know the denominator. We don't really know how many people have been exposed. The very rough estimates are it may be as many as 50% of people are asymptomatic. Maybe another 30% are mildly symptomatic. Are those real numbers? We really don't know. What are the immune responses that are made by the 50% or whatever the right number is, asymptomatic people, or the 30% mildly symptomatic people? Those are the key features that we need to understand. Then we need to understand, what about people who have recovered from the natural infection? What does their immune system look like? Do they have T-cell responses? Do they have antibody responses? The rest of it. So I think that as we are racing ahead, and some of the others on this call are racing ahead with their technology, in parallel, hopefully we and others are going to learn more about what the nature of this illness is, the epidemiology, and the healthy, productive immune response. Pretty much so far, successful vaccines have only recapitulated the immune response of healthy individuals who have recovered. There really aren't that many examples where you can induce an immune response that the body isn't otherwise able to make. So I think that as we learn more about the natural process where people recover, then and may be protected, then we'll be able to work more efficiently as vaccine developers.
Okay.
I think Seth has a very good point. I'd also like to add that the idea. I was on a conference call with the World Health Organization earlier this week, and they talked about that they're in the process of designing this kind of multi-arm trial where they immediately go into testing and comparing vaccine A to vaccine B to vaccine C in a way that makes rigorous statistical sense. So that's one way to accelerate parallel development. I think another one that really hasn't been touched upon yet too much was the idea of combining vaccines or that have different mechanism of action, because we don't understand the what's going on with this disease. And finally, I think manufacturing. So most drugs, most vaccines, you go through small scale, then large scale commercial manufacturing. I think over here we're looking at ways to accelerate the manufacturing process, which is always a bottleneck in the development of any vaccine and any drug. So, but I think a lot of steps are being done right now to really provide this acceleration that you're talking about.
Well, that's a really good segue into a comment by Mark, because Mark and I have talked about this before, and that's kind of Dyadics bread and butter right there, the manufacturing side. What's your thought, Mark?
Well, I think he's 100% correct. I don't think anybody's going to make one vaccine in one place for everybody on the planet. And so if you can produce vaccines in country, which is the ideal outcome, for example, it would be great. Smaller footprints, but massive output. And so one of the things that I think addresses all of this, there's a group in Europe that we've been working with, John, called ZAPI, the Zoonotic Anticipation Preparedness Initiative. They started that in 2015. They're getting ahead and are ahead of the curve. So they've put together a group of coronavirus, MARS, SARS, zoonotic disease experts that are ready, so that they just pop in the different gene for the recipe into a cell line, and they have all the animal studies, the animal models in place, phase 1, phase 2 trials. So it just the gene changes depending on the disease. So they're ahead of the curve on that, and we've been involved in that program since 2015, and that's why we're working with them. And we've had great success, as you know, in ZAPI. That led to your question. We've actually demonstrated in our technology with that ZAPI antigen that in a 200-liter fermenter, we can make 100 or 10 million doses of a vaccine. Now, a 200-liter fermenter is the size of a 55-gallon drum. So if you want to make 100 million doses, you just go to a 2,000-liter fermenter. We're not talking about doing that in a year. We're talking about doing that in 121 hours. So
if you think about the multiple of production from chicken eggs versus your C1 in one of the potential vaccines out there, what kind of multiple would you see? 10 to 1, 100 to 1? Is there some sense of that you have?
Well, I think if you take it down in the real world to a quicker, faster way of making things, recombinantly, take baculovirus insect cells, we were 35 to 1. We made 35 times more of it, and it was more effective.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
Our whole key here is, as I think Seth points out, and David points out, Jeff, is this recipe, the gene sequence has to match the disease. And as long as scientists can find out what it is going to turn on and turn off, and neutralize the virus, we can make it quick and affordable and flexible commercial scales. Because as you know, we've run up to 500,000 liters. And to be honest with you, that would be about 100 billion doses of vaccines in a week.
Which might be how much we need.
Well, I don't think we'll need that much. I think we only need 8 billion for the whole world, but we can do that very easily. The problem is we'll make so much of that, the downstream processing, I don't think anybody can handle that in that kind of volume. But it's really up to the recipe, as I think Seth points out and David points out, is what gene do you need to encode for what, whether it's a treatment or a vaccine. You better have the right sort of sequence or you're not going to do anything. So an ineffective vaccine is useless, whether it's too expensive or affordable. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter.
Right. So looking at the development process, the vaccine development process, we have several stages. We have the preclinical stage, clinical. We have the submission of the FDA regulatory authority, and then their approval, and then manufacturing, distribution. As we look at these different parts of the chain, what is the biggest bottleneck? And then also what's the easiest? I mean, what do we need to focus our most of our attention on?
Well, to follow on Mark's comments, I think what we really need to find out is what's the recipe And I think that's the wonderful aspect of having almost 100 companies, maybe more than 100 companies, um, advancing their technologies towards this goal. There are so many patients in the United States that I think that clinical trials on 100 vaccines are very realistic. Hopefully that situation will slow down, but at the current time, it looks like having people to test is not going to be a limiting factor. And with respect to each of the vaccine technologies, they all have their own challenges in terms of manufacturing and process control and other things like that. So everyone will have to individually work those out, and hopefully there'll be government funds to help us advance our programs.
And just to add a comment to that, I think the point is, if you load a recipe or a sequence in an inefficient manufacturing process, in the end, you end up with shortages or too expensive vaccines or drugs that aren't really going to be available to the public. So manufacturing is a critical component. It's, again, sequence, recipe, and how do you make it affordable and large enough volumes for all these vaccines. And there's a huge number of people working on the recipes, and there are people that have different manufacturing processes in addition to what we have. But if you put it in an inefficient cell, you're not going to get anywhere quick. So you got to match the two together.
All right. Well, looking at the other side of the coin, there are also risks to vaccines. Most of these are well known, and I've spoken with several of you about it. Who wants to talk about some of the risks? I mean, David, I talked about it. Jeff, I mentioned it a while back as well. Disease enhancement comes up. Maybe we can talk about that and some of the other issues that we have with vaccines out there.
Well, I'll just start off. I'm a big believer that, they're different risks. They become more predominant as you move along the development process and all. I think one of the biggest challenges, which leads to a risk, is understanding the vaccine enhancement pathology, having the adequate humanized models to be able to evaluate that. We never did obtain those models under SARS. Had we, we'd probably be further along today. We're working to find those today. People working to develop those. We're trying to work in parallel because we want to get certain products into humans and start gathering some data back. At the same time, we're trying to develop adequate humanized models, and also we can learn about this on a challenge standpoint, on an efficacy standpoint. I think that there's a real risk if we don't accomplish that of exposing patients to undue risk. At some point, we may have to there may have to be decisions made that it's worth it just to go full steam ahead without having those adequate models, but closely monitoring and all. So I think that's a challenge we have to give great consideration to, and one that could lead to some horrible results if we don't pay attention.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think a big risk is financial risk. We don't have $1 billion like Johnson & Johnson to throw at the COVID-19 space, however much we'd like to. So we need the resources, and we need the government resources to step in and help us move forward something that is very different from what anyone expected. And I'd just like to ask the other panelists, maybe by a show of hands, who out there would develop a vaccine if you didn't have government resources to assist you in it? Who would utilize their own company money to actually bring a vaccine through the clinic? Is there anyone? Yeah, I didn't think so. We wouldn't either, because I mean it's a crazy endeavor, especially if you're dealing with something so unknown like coronavirus. So, but that to us is a big risk. We need the government resources to progress the vaccine.
If I might add, I think Jeff's point is extremely important and all, because unless you are a Sanofi, a Merck, a Johnson & Johnson, where you have the resources, you have the available capital to actually develop a vaccine without government support, and yet they still receive and accept government support to advance forward in certain vaccine development. So, probably most of us, if not all of us on this call, we're dependent on it. It's critical to it. I was just asked today by the office of one of our U.S. Senators from for the state of Georgia in terms of what is our status. I recently spent a week in Washington, D.C., met with the entire congressional delegation for Georgia, as well as some in South Carolina, since I have lived in South Carolina. And so they're following up. I'm keeping them updated on our applications for funding, and they were asking about how is your progress. And as I pointed out to them, thus far, we have done all of our work, which we've designed, constructed, and finalizing the purification, all on our own dime, and we're a very lowly capitalized company and all. And so we will not be able to go forward with the path that we've laid out with meeting certain timetables and doing certain steps in parallel unless we receive funding from the government. I'm sure Jeff probably shares that as well as others.
Oh, absolutely critical. I mean, we could bring it so far. I mean, we designed the drug with our own money and we bring it up to the point of manufacturing. But when you start talking about CMC costs, that's when the numbers get really high. And it's not something we could afford to do as a company by and go a risk for something like that. May be here for a long time. It may mutate. It may be gone next year. Nobody knows.
Yeah,
So I agree completely.
Yeah, and I agree that as a small biotech company, you can't take those risks even if you have the money. We actually have the money if you want to do CGB manufacturing, take it into phase 1. But then that's betting it all on sort of one shot, and we're a platform technology. It's really here just to help. But we're lucky because we actually have the Israeli Institute of Biological Research, who does have the money and has the resources. So you need to find partners. And we also have other partners we're in discussions with, different organizations or governmental groups. But they're looking at Dyadic as not only the coronavirus, they're looking at being ready and having a pandemic sort of platform ready for the next one, and killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Combating the virus today, being ready for the next one tomorrow, and using it to lower the cost of prescription drug manufacturing for the planet. But it's impossible for small companies. It would be almost negligent for any of us to take that risk on, with or without the money, because we're not J&J, we're not Sanofi. We may have better mousetraps than both of them, and we in Dyadic have evidence based on Sanofi's own data, we do have a better mousetrap. But that doesn't mean they won't use their own mousetrap instead of ours, because of course, they are comfortable with what they're doing and they think it takes less risk. But smart, bright people like the people on this call will find partners. You just need to knock on more doors. And I'm not sure the US government will or won't be there for all of us, but there are people out there that are willing to, especially with a disease like this, that's impacting everybody. I mean, you see these guys, some of the people that have these retail shopping centers or office buildings, they want to get people back in those buildings so they can get the rent paid. So there's different places to go talk to, and I suggest that you might think about where else you might find those cash other than U.S. government. Although we've had good response with the U.S. government, and we'll see what happens. But you can't just rely on one source of capital.
Right. It's a public good, so it really needs to have public funding. And you brought up a point, Mark, that maybe some of the other vaccine producers can mention on about a platform. There was this thing that David and I were talking about Disease X, which was intended to develop a response for emerging infectious diseases, just like coronavirus. I think that CEPI came out with something on that mid last year. It seems like a smart approach, but have any of you seen that, Seth? I don't know. Have you seen that? Any discussion of that, or think that's a good pursuit of Disease X type?
Yes, and we've been developing a platform so that in a modular way, we can insert a new gene that would represent an antigen from a new infectious agent into our platform. And that's a way to rapidly respond. And we believe we are rapidly responding, like the other people on this call are rapidly responding. But I think that, the Disease X, it's a great brand, and I really applaud CEPI and all the work that they're doing, the Gates Foundation, WHO. But I think it may be more apt to say it'll have to be Disease X, Y, and Z, because there clearly need to be vaccines matched to the particular circumstances of the infectious agent. So for example, in polio, all you need to do is have an antibody to block the virus from getting into the brain. So in polio, a relatively straightforward humoral response is going to be pretty protective, whether you have a live or attenuated virus or inactivated one. In this one, we really don't know. And as I said earlier, we're going to have to understand what kind of vaccine we need. And it may not, it won't be the same vaccine for every infectious disease, and it won't be the same vaccine for every individual to protect against a single condition.
Yeah, and I agree with Seth. You know, it's one thing to build a new drug around a platform. So we have a platform as well at HEAT, our vaccine platform that we've dosed over 300 patients with in non-small cell lung cancer, and we're seeing great results. And we see that the cells that we inject activate T cells, and the T cells evade cancer cells. And we've used the same platform for Zika, for malaria, for HIV, SIV, with Department of Defense and NIH funded grants. Now, so the platform is there, and we see really good things with the platform. The issue is, and we could again plug and play new antigens in there to use the platform to focus on COVID-19, which is what we're doing now. It's not just building the drug. That's a small piece of it. The key piece is manufacturing and testing. And whatever platform you use, you're still going to have to do that with any new drug you design. And that's where the time and the cost and the big question mark is.
And that's really, John, as we talked about ZAPI and that European group, to hit Jeff's point, they put all those pieces of the puzzle together in the last 5 years, since 2015, so that if you do have the sequence, you can put it into a cell line, could be C1, but they also have the animal studies and the animal models, because they've been working with SARS and MERS and coronavirus, and they have the phase 1 and phase 2 trial, hospitals ready to go. So it's kind of like to your disease X, but with all the different pieces of the puzzle in place. And that's what they wanted to put in place. And that's what they did. So they were ahead of the curve. And I think that's what I think, Jeff, you're talking to. It's not just about the gene or the platform. It's about having the animal studies, the right people, the experience in place. It's about being ready for the phase 1 trials, phase 2 trials. But I think to your point earlier, it's all really about regulatory in the end, because you have to have a safe, not just an effective vaccine or drug. It has to be safe. And they're taking shortcuts, which in some ways is good, in some ways could be problematic. So I think Dave's point, who knows what's going to happen somewhere with some of these trials going on. They've rushed them out so fast. Will they work? Will they be dangerous? Will they be safe? Will it be long-term effect? What we really know is we don't know enough. And so we need more shots on goal, but we have to have the whole platform, not just a manufacturing or discovery, the animal models and everything else along the way, including how can you short track a safe regulatory approval process? Because that's really the time-consuming aspect of all of this.
Let me go down a little bit different road here. So the CARES Act, I think that was, I forget how many trillions of dollars that was in total, but there was 8.3 billion allocated towards treatments, vaccines, and diagnostic research, and that passed just a few weeks ago. But allocating funds and then actually getting those funds to who needs them to do the research are two different things. So I wanted to get a sense of everyone's thoughts on the panel of how easy has it been to pursue these funds? Has it been easy? Have you been able to talk to people? Perhaps have you even received some of these funds yet? And what are the thoughts on the allocation process so far? And of course, it's only been a few weeks, but I'd love to hear what you've been seeing there.
I'll comment on our experiences. There was initially the 8.3 billion, of which 3 billion was allocated for research and development for vaccines, treatments, and diagnostics and all. And then in the 2.2 trillion, there was another huge chunk of money, again, in support of research and development, which includes within it for vaccines and all. The federal government, as we understand, have been guided as using HHS or BARDA as the portal for seeking and then the subsequent distribution of those funds. We have made several applications into BARDA thus far. Our first one we made in February. On February 17th, they acknowledged it and accepted it for review on the 19th. It took till March the 24th for us to be able to have a Tech Watch discussion with them, which was somewhat frustrating and all, because that's a little over a month. And then subsequently, they requested that we follow through with a white paper as part of the BARDA BAA process, which we have done that several weeks ago. And so we're into their queue. At the same time, we've submitted into the CEPI expression of interest application of the Dyadics platform that we've discussed in various settings and all. So it's been easy to submit and all. It's much more challenging because all of us become very anxious. You know, the moment you do the submission and you receive that receipt of the submission, you're wondering, why have they not stopped everything else and just reviewed ours? And so that's human nature and all, but we're all awaiting that. And I'm sure that they are busy as can be, but we have several of them. We have done everything, as I have mentioned and others have said, at risk, you know, on our own small pocketbook thus far and all. But it does make an impact. And all. We would be doing certain types of characterization and completing our purification. We would have been finished by now if we had greater funds. But we're having to do that and manage through because, frankly, with resources, we have other projects that we're committed to with the U.S. Army, with NIH and others, and we have to deliver on those.
I can add a few color if nobody else wants to. I think the government is working very hard. I think it is frustrating because we all realize every day is somebody's dying that's theoretically down the road wouldn't be or suffering. And I think to David's point is, you know, 80% of what we do is what we were doing before the coronavirus showed up, just like the other companies. This is an additional opportunity. This isn't the only opportunity we have. So you can't spend all your money on a long shot. And I think as good as we all feel about it, I think our technologies can really make a difference. We can't take that risk without some capital, and we could accelerate what we all do, make it quicker, get to the end point faster with more resources. And I do think that BARDA and the HHS, and we know both of them very well, are busy looking at everyone's applications, but they really don't, in some ways, have enough resources to really deal with the input. And I think they're overloaded, and they're trying to sort through the chaff. You know, a lot of the things that they see are just completely fantasies. And so whether they even have the ability to know which ones are reality and fantasies, depending on who's dealing with it. You know, when they're sorting through these applications, it isn't the people at BARDA that are the head people that really are the scientists. You just have no idea who maybe turns you down or accepts you, or if there's politics in the middle of it all. But every one of us would like a nice check so we can accelerate our opportunities to bring healthcare to people faster. And we're all probably waiting for the same thing.
Yeah, I agree with Mark. I think the whole process is really a black box at this point, and you know, what the transitions that they've had to make and how they had to ramp up. You know, I really sympathize with them. But we don't know how the process is being made. We don't know who's making the decision to a large degree. So you know, and I like to also reiterate. You know. Like Mark said, we're doing COVID work, but our primary focus is oncology. You know, we have a completed phase 2 oncology program, and you know, this is important, but it's, you know, on top of what our core business is. It's not a transformation of the company, but I think with the you know, it's you know, to a large degree, it's taken over our mind share and mind share of the public as we look to deal with this pandemic right now.
And I think everybody probably feels the same. If you got the money, Jeff, it would advance not only the coronavirus, it advances science that you could use for your cancer research or development in your other programs. And that's what we at Dyadic looked at the coronavirus in the first place, was getting us in demand sooner than later with resources provided by a third party, and getting that validation that then opens the platform up for access worldwide. And every one of us would advance science quicker. And that's why I said there's a silver lining to all this earlier, just kind of like when we went to the moon and the whole internet and computer industry benefited, and the world got paid back in spades with that investment. The same thing is going to happen here. All of us would like to get just a little piece of that and to be able to help that happen quicker and faster. I know we would, and I think everyone on this panel would like to do that. And more importantly, I think all of us believe we can help get a vaccine or a treatment like an antibody out to patients sooner than later. And it's frustrating that we can't do that as quick as we all would like to.
We got about 10 minutes left,
Yeah.
and I wanted to give everybody a chance to talk a little bit about their individual program that they're working on. So, Mark, since you're talking right now, why don't you just share a little bit about what Dyadic is doing, and we'll just go Mark, David, Jeff, and Seth, and just give us about 2.5 minutes each on what you're working on in coronavirus.
Yeah, and I apologize. When I'm done, I'm going to have to cut off because I have a 3:30 conference that I'm chairing on coronavirus with different companies. But we work with the Israeli Institute of Biological Research. That's public. They have 50 coronavirus scientists working on both antibodies and vaccines. And so we, again, are the ones that would get the sequences, turn them into proteins, and then they can test them in animal models. And ultimately, they have a CGMP facility to bring that forward. In addition to that, we're working with three of the top 20 coronavirus experts from that ZAPI program, where we were involved for the last 5 years. Coincidentally, part of ZAPI was MERS and SARS and coronavirus research. So they were teed up when this came. They already have their recipes that they believe are viable, efficient, would be low dosage, high effective vaccines that we're now working on cloning into C1 so they can get them into animal studies. And then we're also working with the Scripps research out of La Jolla. They're making nanoparticle vaccines. Again, that professor at UFOVax, which is a spin out of Scripps, the professor has been working on HIV and other related MERS and SARS research, and he has now narrowed it down to a few candidates, and we'll take those sequences and move those forward. And besides that, there's a lot of other things incubating that I really am not free publicly to talk about, but we have a lot of shots on goal, and we're offering the platform technology to help anybody. We're not just doing it on the projects we're working on. If you have a sequence that you need to be made into a protein, we want to help you do it. And we'll help you bring it to market so that we can get those 8 billion doses of vaccines from whatever recipe or gene sequence out to people sooner than later and affordably. Because if it's not affordable, it's ineffective.
All right, thank you, Mark. David?
Thank you. So our expertise at Dyadics is primarily related to the design and the construct and development of vaccines, especially of infectious diseases that typically have demonstrated in various models and all that they provide 100% protection, a single dose, no boosters, no adjuvants, and they are constructed in a manner that they provide cost-effective manufacturing. So that's what we do. We outsource all of our animal testing, all of our preclinical work through relationships we have. We have outsourced contractors in terms of manufacturing with whom we've worked before. We've been in over 500 people in HIV prevention vaccine, so we know how to manufacture, have it manufactured, carry it forward, CMC, regulatory, all of that aspect we do through a few highly qualified and validated manufacturers. People have been signed off on by the FDA, Department of Defense, et cetera, and all. So that's what we focus on. With COVID-19, we have 3 candidates we've developed. We're working in conjunction with BravoVax, a vaccine company based in Wuhan, China. They are more on the manufacturing side. They don't have experience working with our platform, so they're waiting for us to deliver to them our 3 candidates, if you want to call them that, are 3 vaccines for which they would run in parallel what we will be initiating, which will be the animal testing and going forward and doing all of the elements here in the US while they're doing parallel types of activities in China and all. That's what we're focused on and what we do. And we more recently also branched into immuno-oncology, and we set up a separate private subsidiary using our same platform. And we now are working in producing vaccines around tumor-associated antigens in combination with immune checkpoint inhibitors and all. And we've had fairly good results that we've done in some humanized animal models that we've conducted. Thank you.
Okay. Jeff?
Great. Well, we are focused on developing a very novel platform technology that has the ability to really activate robust pan-antigen T-cell attack against any antigens we program into the cells. So our primary focus is oncology, and we've dosed over 300 patients in multiple oncology trials. We just completed enrollment in our phase 2 non-small cell lung cancer trial using this approach. Now it's the same approach that we're using in oncology that we're now applying to COVID-19. It could be used for infectious disease, and we've done it with our collaborators at University of Miami with Zika, malaria, HIV, and now we're creating a cell line that secretes COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 antigens to activate a T cell. So we're focused primarily on a T cell response against these, and it's a very novel platform, and we look forward to trying to move this into the clinic for COVID-19 as quickly as we can.
Great. Seth?
Thank you. We have a platform of a live replicating virus called horsepox, and we are also looking for a T cell response, which I'm glad that other people on this call are focused on that. We think that that's, from everything we know about COVID so far, we think that that's the most promising approach. And our program is, I think, well adapted to COVID because it's scalable to manufacture. A live replicating vaccine is relatively inexpensive to make because the dose is relatively low. But we are going to be targeting, with our vaccine, healthy, immunocompetent, non-pregnant adults. So we will be going after the portion of the population that would be kind of the bulwark of herd immunity. So we believe this is a platform that can be deployed to multiple other conditions, appropriate conditions, by cloning in antigens. There are a lot of advantages to using the vector system that we're using. It doesn't integrate. There's a lot of safety data on this kind of vaccine, and we think that COVID is a challenging condition, and we think that by testing it quickly, we should be able to get some answers about whether this approach is appropriate.
Okay, very good. Well, I think we're supposed to right now give everybody who's listening our names and websites so they can find more information if they want to. I'll start out with myself, John Vandermosten at Zax, and our website is scr.zax.com. And I guess we can go down the line, David, Jeff, and Seth, and then give a final summary of where people can find more information.
David Dodd with GeoVax, that's GEOVAX. Website is geovax.com.
My name is Seth Letterman. I'm with Tonix Pharmaceuticals. The website is TONIX Pharma, PHARMA.com.
And my name is Jeff Wolf. I'm with Heat Biologics. The website is heatbio, HEATBIO.com.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for participating on the panel today. I really love to hear your input, and it really helps me understand what's going on as an analyst, talking to all of you on the front lines of the search for a vaccine and solution to coronavirus. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today, Zax moderated a panel with Tonix Pharmaceuticals, Dyadic International, Heat Biologics, and GeoVax. Zax provides research coverage for all of these companies.
Thank you all for joining this panel. Real quick, I know Mark had to jump off, so for anybody that wants to find out more information about Dyadic International, please go to www.dyadic.com. That's DYADIC.com. And again, thank you to John Vandermosten, Senior Biotech Analyst at Zacks Small Cap Research, as our moderator, as well as Jeff Wolf from Heat Biologics, Mark Emalfarb from Dyadic International, Seth Letterman from Tonix Pharmaceuticals, as well as David Dodd from GeoVax. Thank you all, and please stay safe.